All righty. I think we're live. Hey, everybody. Good to have you on. We're going to see there's quite a few people already on. Welcome. We'll get started here in just a few minutes, probably in about 1 or 2 minutes, allow everybody to hop on. All right. And as we're waiting, we'd love for you to type in the chat. Where are you calling in from? What school, location? As many of you know, I'm outside the Philly area, waiting desperately for it to warm up around here at some point. Anxiously awaiting the Phillies to start. Hey, Diana. Good to see a lot of familiar names on here. Hey, Michael. Daniel, how's it going? All right. Sean from Germany. Awesome. My family's from Germany. I took 4 years of German in high school. I wish I could remember one thing, but I really can't about speaking the language. All right, so we'll get started here in a minute. I'm going to share my screen, actually. Just want to highlight one thing while we're waiting. So let's do this. So you should be seeing the upcoming events tab here. Just wanted to bring this to everybody's attention. I added this to the website. I'm going to be likely hosting a webinar a week. That's the goal right now, doing some demo days as well. Some folks have been liking those. So obviously today, that's this webinar. Next Thursday, for anybody that's interested, I'm hosting a webinar on Google search campaigns. Google search are one of my favorite types of ad campaigns. It's one of the campaigns I get asked a lot about, and but it can be very, very confusing to set up. So I'm going to talk about how you can set up the perfect Google search ad campaign in 10 minutes. So more events to come. Just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. Now, bear with me here. You guys seen a flashing screen? That's going weird, huh? Hold on, let's try this again. David, good question. So yeah, this is going to be recorded. You'll get the slides. The moment this is done processing the recording, you'll get an automatic email with the replay and the slides as well. All right. So with that being said, why don't we get rolling here? Share. There we go. All right, everybody. Again, thanks for hopping on. Excited about today's presentation, talking all about automation. It's been a hot topic recently. This would be a really good one to talk about. Let's why don't I start with a poll? I put together a poll. Why don't we start there? And then I have an informal question for everybody. So let me share a poll. Would just love to get a sense of, where's everybody at with their level of automation, your skills with automation, kind of how you're using it currently. So I'm going to share the screen right. You should see a poll pop up right now. So it's, what's your ninja level when it comes to marketing automation? Would you consider like an apprentice, a dabbler, a true Jedi master using automation all the time, or maybe just not using it at all? I figured dabbler was going to be the big one. A few folks still using Excel for the CRM. I hear you. All right. All right. So I think you're all able to see that. So let's close this out. All right. Real quick, are you guys still seeing the poll? Is it in front of the screen? Is it interfering with anything? Or you should hopefully be seeing the entire title screen here. Just want to double check. Okay. All right. So let's audience window. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, so here's what we're going to cover today. Sorry, I'm just getting my bearings here. New webinar software. I love software, and here I am with new webinar software. I'm just kind of getting my bearings. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the state of enrollment management. There's some changes we all need to be aware of. That's what's going to lend itself to why we need to be looking at automation a little bit more. And then we're going to talk about there's different types of automation. There's probably some automation you're using all the time. There's some, I guess you would consider there's some common sense automation. Then there's, I don't know if you want to consider it advanced, but some really cool things that we can do these days with the technology that's available to us so that we don't have to be fearful of automation. We don't have to be fearful that automation takes away from personal connection. And in fact, they can actually enhance it. So we'll talk about that. And then what I like to call automation anchors. So when you're thinking about what do we want to build our automation around, there's some core anchors to get started with. You could get lost in automation if you really want to go down that rabbit hole. There's so many things you can do and get really fancy. I don't think a lot of it's necessary. I think there's a couple core elements that you might want to automate, and we're going to get into those today. So my goal for you today is to walk away with 2 or 3 automations that you can get started with right away and start implementing. And obviously, we're going to get into some use cases and examples. And then we'll talk about a little bit of the AIMS platform. What I'm going to be showing you here is automations that I built inside the platform. You can actually get access to them. They're all pre-built. You get them all, so you don't have to worry about the tech setup. But that brings me to the point, though, of obviously, to do automation, you need a platform to use the automation, whether that's a HubSpot, an ActiveCampaign, maybe a MailChimp or something like that. Because when we talk about automation, usually it's going to be centered around email. We can incorporate text messages and things like that. And then there's some things that go beyond that. But let me ask this, so I know I did a poll already, but let me ask an informal question. If you could just pop in the chat, what type of automation software are you using currently? What type of automation software are you using currently? Excuse me. Michelle, you had said none. Michael, you got HubSpot. Awesome. I love HubSpot. Sebastian, IntelliKids. I have not heard of IntelliKids. I'll have to look into that one. Final Site. Yep. Final Site has workflows, has some automation in there. Diana, MailChimp. Final Site. Cool. Okay, great. So for those that said none, that's okay, right? So you're going to walk away today understanding what's capable, what are you able to do, and then we can talk about different platforms to utilize to execute some of these automated tasks. Okay, awesome. So let's move right along. So again, briefly, I'm not going to spend too much time here. Mercifully, brief introduction. I know many of you have been on webinars with me in the past. We've spoken in the past. A lot of those years were spent at ISM. Grateful for my time there. Loved it. Spent the last couple of years, working on the digital marketing agency side that was set up. Working with a lot of you. Working with really hundreds of schools. Doing a lot of workshops. That's also again what led me to kind of where I'm at now with the software platform, because having these conversations, right? Hey, what software are you using? We're using Final Site and MailChimp. And, the part of the issue is that they can all kind of do cool things. And there's a lot of amazing software platforms out there. But it's like, how do we get them to connect? How do we get them to talk to each other? And so you have to use multiple platforms. How can we do all of our automation in one spot? Because if you start piecing things together, then that gets a little bit messy. So again, that's why I'm here. That's why I built the platform that I built, and I'm always excited to share with folks. And again, we're going to be using it here today. But what you'll see today is, for those that are using automation software, the concepts are going to be the same, right? So you don't need aims to do what we're going to talk about today, but at least you'll be able to see what is possible and hopefully get the gears turning in terms of what type of automation you could set up. All righty, so let's talk about some of the challenges right now that we're facing when it comes to, when I say enrollment management, certainly that we think of admissions, but how does marketing play into that? So there's a couple challenges that I know y'all are facing. One of them being that, families these days, incredibly digitally savvy, right? We all kind of are upping our game with the digital world these days, with AI, with all of it, and as people become more digitally savvy, we're also getting very good at trying to filter out as much unwanted messaging as possible, right? We're all getting inundated with emails and everything. So it's like, how do we get rid of that clutter? But also, what families are also craving is that deeper connection that is tailored to their interests. Because again, families, students as well, right? We all know middle school students, high school students, they play such a pivotal role in choosing the school that they're going to go to, that they hold so much more influence than ever before in the admissions journey, and they know it, right? And along those lines, and I got this data from the niche.com parent survey, which is 64% of families are applying to 3 or more schools, and I think it's 24% are applying to 5 schools, right? So again, they have kind of this power in the selection process because they're giving themselves more options than ever before, right? So that's also something we have to factor in and think about. Okay, digitally savvy, how do we build that personal connection so that you're the logical choice versus the competitor down the street? And then also, though, this also brings about incredible digital demands, right? I know many of you are part of 1-2-person teams, right? So with really the rapidly changing demographics and admission process for families, I know many of you, things that I've heard, it's like, hey, we want new ways to reach and communicate with families in a really hyper-targeted, relevant, personalized way. But then how do you do that, right? Especially how do you do that personalization without adding to the workload that you already have? Especially with a small team, right? So how do we do that? And obviously, that's what lends itself to talking about automation. And here's just some of the screenshots I pulled this from niche.com survey. This is that 64% number. It was 23% are 5 or more schools, 64% are 3 or more schools. And the other interesting data point as well is that the length of time that it takes for families to kind of get to that application and enrollment decision. Because yes, there are a lot of school options, but also if you look at the chart on the right, if you add up some of those numbers, about 80% of families are at least 6 months away from applying, with close to 30% there, is that 27%, that are 1 to 2 years away or more from applying. So there are families that are coming into your database, they're attending events, they're inquiring, that you need to stay in front of for months at a time, if not years, right? So how do you do that, right? How do you do that without trying to remember, manually reaching out, setting task reminders, things like, how do we do that in a really thoughtful and deliberate way? Obviously, the answer is we can use some pretty cool automation to do that. But let me explain how kind of I view automation, because it might mean different things to different people. I look at marketing automation as a mechanism in which us marketers out there, we can send relevant and personalized messages. Typically, it's going to be through email, could be through text message, but primarily through email, that are time or behavior triggered. So relevant personal messages that are going to be triggered by either a time or an event or behavior. And we're going to get into that specifically here in a second. All right. Now, when done right, right? So if anybody here, especially if you're not using automation, you've ever been fearful of automation, that was always one of the things that, talking with admission offices, they were very concerned about implementing some automated outreach because they felt that they would lose that personal touch, which I completely get. And there's obviously a time to take things offline, to do manual outreach, to pick up the phone, right? But then there's also other times where, hey, we can be using automation for some of these things. So again, I've seen when it's done right, you can actually build relationships before anybody even steps off on campus. You can customize your communication to build relationships. Obviously, with automation, we're looking to save time, repetitive tasks. How can we save time, especially for those small offices, right? The small teams. Time is precious. How do we save time? Also saving money, right? If you're automating some things using the right software, you can reduce subscription fees. You can get rid of some things as well. So you can actually save some money. Certainly, when you start thinking about admission events, increasing show-up rates, tours, events, right? Webinar events, how do you increase show-up rates? So we could talk about that. At the end of the day, what we're aiming for certainly is how do we implement automation to increase our conversion rate and our yield from inquiry to application to acceptance to enrollment, right? So with that, along with the data that you're going to be able to get now, that's the end goal, right? So when done right, you're going to get some really great data. Hopefully you're going to be able to increase your conversion rates, because primarily it's going to be tied back to the goal is to build automation that personalizes communication. All right. So let's talk about triggers, right? Typically, you're going to have two triggers for automation: time and behavior-based. So a key component of marketing automation, it's going to be coming from an action that sets off a relevant marketing message. So when you think about time-based, right, you're thinking about maybe there's an upcoming deadline, a special occasion, right? We've all received these types of notifications. You just think about, even in the retail world, right? It's your birthday coming up. You get that special discount offer for your birthday, time-based, right? So you've certainly been a recipient of those, and we're going to get into some more school-specific time-based ones. Excuse me. Still can't get rid of this cold. It's been like weeks. Then we have behavior-based triggers. So this is typically when somebody takes an action, and regardless of timing, it's going to trigger some sort of automation based upon an action they've taken. So signing up for a newsletter, downloading an ebook, or one of the lead magnets I like to talk a lot about, or signing up for an event, whatever it might be, somebody took an action, and that's going to trigger automation. Excuse me. All right. So again, let's talk about some benefits, and I'll get through this quickly because I do want to get to some of the examples, and that's kind of where we're going to end up. I'm going to be building some examples live in front of you, so that you can see this in action. But again, four benefits: sending relevant messages automatically, right? We might feel like in order to do relevant messages, we need to manually send them out, but obviously that's somewhere between a hassle and downright impossible when you start thinking about how many people are in your database. Even if you're checking your CRM every single day, that becomes extremely difficult and a tremendous hassle to constantly be going in there and looking. We can do a lot of cool things with automation. So again, the goal is keeping folks engaged through the entire process without feeling like you're spending days composing email messages to people. Again, pre-planned time-based reminders, admission deadlines, deposits, campus event registrations. We can certainly, and again, this is probably what we're all familiar with, those reminders that need to go out. We're certainly going to go beyond. I'm not having you come on to a webinar talking about reminders. Reminders are very common. Every platform has, to a degree, some reminders. We want to go beyond that, but certainly that's a level of automation. Another really cool one is actually letting families self-nurture. And what that means is if you set up certain things that would indicate a level of interest, academic interest, you can actually set up what are called trigger links. So a lot of these automation platforms will have what are called trigger links, that if somebody clicks that link, it's an indication that they're interested in that topic, and that can set them on a whole new path for communication, right? So their marketing messages can automatically change too. So that's really cool. Something definitely needs to be planned out, but something that's really cool that can be done. And also the automation can help you to know when it's time to actually take a conversation offline. So if you're tracking families through your workflows, one of the things that I'll share with you is the concept of lead scoring. Platforms like HubSpot, I don't know about MailChimp, but I know at least HubSpot and some of the others, you're able to do something called lead scoring. So as families are engaging with you, from just opening an email, you get a score for opening an email, to filling out a form, that's another score, or they visited certain pages, or they booked an appointment with you. Each one of those activities can get a score. And when that score gets high enough, you can get a notification saying, hey, like this person is really, like, they're opening every single email, they're clicking links. That might be the time to reach out to them if you haven't heard from them. So you can get a notification that score gets high. So you don't have to worry about going to look through your CRM. You can actually get notified as families are engaging with your content, with your messages. Is there anybody here that's actively using lead scoring, especially for those folks that are, on HubSpot or Final Site? Anybody using lead scoring? Don't see anybody using lead scoring. That's okay. It's usually one of those things that's like a nice to have, but if you take some time to kind of sit back and take a couple hours and build out your lead scoring, it's something that can give you a lot of information. Because the other piece of information it can give you, yes, it can give you a notification about, hey, it's time to contact this person. As families are enrolling, you can also look back at their lead scores and say, you know what, when somebody hits a score of 50, like we have like a 90% conversion rate. So we need to make sure they're engaging with our content. So you can start seeing what scores end up leading to applications and enrollment. So that's a really great piece of data that you're able to get. All right, so let's prepare. So before we dive in, I know we all get anxious. I know I do, right? You get new software, you just want to start diving in and using it. We need the prep, right? So the benefits of marketing automation are only as strong as the preparation you put into it. This is usually the pain in the butt, right? It's like, God, we got to prep all these messages and do all this. And that's why I think it's important to get a couple core automations down and not spend days and weeks doing all the fancy stuff, because a lot of the many times you don't even need it. So again, it's important to consider kind of key aspects of the automation and how they're going to influence your implementation of it. So when we think about now the two types of automation, and I know we talked about time-based and behavior-based, but those can also be broken down as well into explicit and implicit signals, because not all triggers are created equally, right? So we need to understand what the difference is between these two. So when we think about explicit, this is where you have a family or a student, whoever, that has pretty much given you a piece of data that you can build a workflow off of, right? So they've indicated, some of these are very obvious, right? You have a form, they've indicated a great level of interest, they've indicated an academic interest. I'll talk about location here in a second. You might say, what location? Maybe you're a boarding school and you're bringing families in from outside, maybe an hour, 2 hours away or further, right? If you know that they're coming from further away, that can actually trigger some additional messaging. I don't know if anybody saw my video that I put up yesterday. I talked about this in a bit of detail. We'll go through it again today. But that can be an interesting one. Even birthdays. If you know their birthday, what's wrong with automating a birthday message, right? So you need to think about how you're going to get this data, right? So that's one of the points of preparation as well. Okay, if we want to build automation off of explicit triggers, how are we going to get the data? Is it going to be part of a form? Are we going to manually update something? What is going to trigger? How are we going to get this data? And we're going to talk about that here in a second, and also give you some warnings about doing that as well. So that will come. So there's explicit, which is they're pretty much giving you the data in one way or another, or there's implicit, in which you're relying on a family's activity rather than, let's say, an explicit submission of a form. And you're hoping that you're going to get relevant build relevant marketing messages off of this. So again, this could occur from website browsing activity, email engagement, getting back to that lead scoring, right? So these are things that can also trigger automation. They're not as reliable as explicit signals. So it's kind of important to factor in to what level of engagement you want to have that happens with the automation. I mean, maybe it's just, hey, when a score gets so high, that's just going to trigger you to manually reach out. And that's fine too. As opposed to, hey, if a score reaches so high, that's now going to automate another message. Maybe you want to do that, maybe you don't. But this can at least help you take the conversation offline. All right. Now, before we start diving in, let's also talk about automation anchors. What are some things that we can build automation around that are very common, right? So you might be thinking to yourself, yeah, there's something like, what should we build automation around? So here's a couple of things. I mentioned location, right? So that's a good one. If it makes sense for you, if you're not a boarding school, you're not bringing in families from, further than 20 minutes away, look, that's not a big deal to you, but it might be a big deal for other schools. Academic interest, obvious one. If you're getting academic interest in a form, whatever it might be, you could build some automation off of that. Grade level of interest, that's a very standard one. You want to build automation and messaging off of somebody who says, I'm interested in high school versus the kindergarten family. You may not want the same messages going out to both. We could build up some lead scoring. We've talked a lot about that already. First generation families is a really interesting one. I've seen this with a couple schools that I've been talking with recently, and I love the concept, which is, when you're first starting, let's say an inquiry, asking a question, or just any form. Do you have a student currently enrolled at the school? Yes or no? And if yes, great, right? The messaging to somebody who's already kind of been through the process, they get it, they know the steps, they know the admission steps, they know all that. Their messaging is going to be different than, hey, what if I said no? This is my first child. This is the first dive into looking at private school. What is that messaging going to look like? That's where you want to be really transparent and laying out all of the steps. Like, hey, congrats on taking the first step. Here's what you need to know about the process. First, you're going to fill out this form. Second, we would encourage you to come on campus. Then you're interested in financial aid. Here's how financial aid works. So you really want to lay out almost like an onboarding process even before they've applied and enrolled, so that they're not questioning, like, what should I be doing next, right? So answering those questions that are going on in their mind. Reactivation is one of my favorite automation campaigns, and that's based upon, has somebody maybe gotten into your database one way or the other? They filled out a form, they inquired, whatever it might be, but have they kind of gone silent for 30 days, 60 days or longer? I guarantee you right now, sitting in your database, there are families that filled out a form a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, that are just sitting there. Maybe they're interested, maybe they're not. We know from the data that families are months away, if not years away. Doing a reactivation campaign can be a great way to get immediate results. You could run this campaign today and potentially get some new inquiries, or at least have somebody reply and be like, yeah, I'm still interested, or no, I'm not, right? And the last one there, and again, there's more than this. These were the core ones that I think we can build around. And what I recommend is maybe picking 1, 2, or 3 maybe. But the last one there is future family activation. This is one, for whatever reason, has been coming up more frequently, where they're like, hey, I'm getting inquiries from families that are literally 2 years away from formally applying. But whatever the system is that you're using, like your enrollment management or your SIS, it's like you're not allowed, like I heard you're not allowed to even put them in the system for tracking purposes. They have to be a year or less out. So what do you do with them? What if they're like, yeah, I'm interested in 2026, 2027? Well, we can do some automations to certainly stay engaged with them, but also send them some messages when it comes time, January 2026, you want to reach out to them and say, hey, it's admissions time. Let's start this process up again. Any other automations that I didn't mention so far? Like I said, we're going to go into some examples, but as I look at these anchors, what are some other automations? Anybody here using their using automations in a different way that they love. It's like, hey, I could not live without this automation. Whether I've said it or not, any automations out there that you couldn't live without? I'm trying to make the silence as awkward as possible, thinking that might trigger somebody to talk about their automations. But that's all right. If you have one, toss it in there, and we'll come back to it. So, all right. Now, last few items before we dive into some examples. Let's talk about a few warnings before embarking on our automation journey here. First, be careful of automation dead ends. I've worked with and talked with many schools that are using software like a HubSpot, right? Where you can do some great things, do a lot of all the automation you would ever need to do. And what ends up happening potentially is you set up all these different automations, and then at some point the automation is going to end. What happens after it ends? If you don't have a next step, like, hey, let's put them over here, what can end up happening is like your families get lost in your like the purgatory of your CRM or your system. It's like they go through the system, they go through the automation, and then they stop, and then that's it. So what I just want to say is be careful, be cognizant of if you have an automation set up, what happens when it ends? Where are they going to go? How do you know where they are so that you can always get to them? All right, so that's warning one. Warning number two is, remember when I said, with explicit triggers, we have to get that data from somewhere. Typically, you're going to get that data by somebody filling out a form. They're going to tell you what their grade level of interest is. I would also just say, yes, it's a way to ask those questions and get those answers, but also be careful with too many form fields, because the data always shows the more fields you add to a form, the lower the conversion rate is of somebody actually finishing that form. So get the necessary information, maybe one or two other questions. Try not to go nuts with like, I could ask, all these questions to get all this data. Yes, you can, but that's also potentially sacrificing somebody just being like, I don't have time to finish this right now. All right, so those are my two warnings. Quick question, am I going to send the recording? Yeah, recording gets sent out automatically once it's done processing. It might take a few hours. So maybe give it till tomorrow, but you'll get the recording and the slides today. All right, so let's go into some use cases. So let me do this. Let me stop sharing for a second. Let me exit out of here. All right, so now I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. All right. So everybody should be seeing the screen now that says workflow list. Again, we're going to go through some use cases. These are not all of the possible use cases. Just a few of the core ones that I would recommend starting with if you want to start going this route. I'm taking you in the back end here of the AIMS platform. This might look familiar again if you're using some others like a Final Site or HubSpot. If you're not using something, just follow along. We can always get you set up and try this, even for free, so you can kind of get a sense of how it works. We'll talk about that at the end, but let's go into some automation. So you'll see I have a handful built here. You're a boarding school that wants campus visits. Those future families that are 2 years out. Prospective family reactivation. What if somebody didn't show up for a tour? So here are just a few of them. The one I would try to start, if you don't have one already, is, and there's actually not a lot of automation involved with this, but this will help you deal with those automation dead ends, which is when somebody's done an automation, where do you send them? One of my recommendations is just put them into your general nurture list, so that no matter what time of the year somebody gets in there, no matter where they are in your admissions funnel process, if they're getting an email once a week, once every 2 weeks, and it's just good, helpful information, then that's just, you could put them in there at any time. So I would recommend setting up a nurture sequence like this maybe you tag them at a certain point. It's like, hey, they're in our high school pipeline, however you want to tag them, and then wait a week, let's send an email. And what's pre-built in here is, okay, what should these emails be that we want to nurture them with? Let's just say it's a frequently asked questions email. Next week, it's what are families saying? Testimonial email. Next week, achieving academic excellence at Ames Academy, right? Alumni success stories. The following week, admissions process and financial aid. What does that look like? Invite to upcoming events. The following week after that, what are the support systems at your school? So you can see here, like this is, I don't even know how many we have in here right now, 20 or so, 20-week nurture sequence that you just need to kind of fill in some of the blanks with this content. But I would recommend trying to start with this. Maybe you don't want one a week. Maybe it's once every 2 weeks. Once a month, you start getting a little bit long there where people maybe forget that even inquired. So I like to stay in front of them a little bit more frequently. This also could be a newsletter. If you have a newsletter, at the very least, utilizing your newsletter. You at least want a place to send people if they're finished in automation or they get in your database. Where can I send them so that we're still staying in front of them and you're creating new content and whether it's new blog content, whatever it might be, new events, that they're going to get it. So that'd be step one. Not a lot of fancy automation here, but it really supports your overall automation strategy. So that's step one. I'd build a long-term nurture sequence. Now, second one, let's go into reactivation, because I think this is one that you could actually do today. Automation helps with this because your first question is, well, how do I know if somebody's not active? Now, if you're using an email platform like a MailChimp, you don't even need something too fancy. You can look to see maybe who hasn't opened an email in 30 days or 60 days, or they haven't been active. So let me show you what this looks like. So, we'll come back to what the trigger is. So what you want to do is day one, you could just send out an email that says, hey, are you still interested in a high school for your student's name? So you can put the student name in there. Are you still looking for a high school? And it can be very simple, right? Just a very simple message. Are you still looking for a high school, a middle school, whatever it might be for your child? And then here's where we can get a little bit fancy. And I like this, which is, let's wait till are they going to reply? We can use AI now to determine, was that answer positive or negative? Meaning, are you interested in high school? If yes, we're going to send them an email. Great. Great to hear from you. Would love to continue our conversation. Let's schedule a time to talk. Right. So now they're out of the reactivation. You're seeing if they're still interested. They replied yes. And if they didn't reply at all, then you do a second attempt. You wait for a reply. Was it positive? If yes, great. If no, then again, you just send them an email that says, great, good luck. Please let me know if there's anything I can help with. That's it. Again, if they don't reply, if they just say, no, we're not interested anymore. It's like, okay, no problem. And you can automate all of that. So I love this automation. It's actually one of my favorites. It's kind of straightforward. But the reason that it's one of my favorites is you could all do this right now, which is go look at your database, who has not been active within the past 30 days, and at least ask that question, are you still interested? And one of the things that I guess I'll show you here is, one of the ways that we do it in here. Let me open up contacts. I should have had this open. So you can look in your system. Are they not opening your emails? If they're not opening your emails, that's an indication that they're not active. We can also, like in here, we have set up what are called smart lists. And activity means open an email, visited a web page, they're active on the website. So any sort of activity that's happening, replying to emails, and you could just build an inactive contacts list. So it's anybody that hasn't been active for more than 15 days. Now you could do 30 days, whatever. But let's say anybody that hasn't been active in 15 days, here's that list of people. Let's send them. We got to pick them out. Let's send them. Yes. Okay. Proceed. And we're going to put them into the reactivation workflow. So you could go look at their activity, who isn't active, and let's just automatically send them that reactivation campaign. So a really cool way to use some automation for activity to get people to come back to you that you haven't heard from in a while. Questions on that? I love simple and effective, and that's what a reactivation campaign is, simple and effective. All right, let's go to this one. Let's go to the boarding school. So let's say we have a boarding school. And again, even if you're not a boarding school, follow along. You can replace what I'm talking about location with academic interest. Let's just use that as an example. But let's talk about how we can use some automation to, again, build that relationship now. So now we're going to get into some more personalized messaging that it looks like you're manually sending it, but you're not. So let's say somebody fills out a form. They're interested in visiting campus. Great. Admissions gets their notification. You send your automated thank you message. Great. Simple. Then what you do is you can set the start time. So what's the start time of their visit? It can be a specific date, like if it's a group tour and you have defined dates, or it could just be whatever time they chose. So we're going to set that time, and there's going to be a reason for us to do that as we get through here. So we've set the time that they have their tour, and let's wait. How long are we waiting? Oh, this was a 10-minute wait. So after the confirmation email, you might want to send them just a second email that looks very personalized. And so let's say excuse me, I'm at a boarding school in Philadelphia. Let's say that's where I'm at. And somebody's applying or filling out a form, and they indicate that they're not in Philadelphia. And I could put some parameters on there, like they're 2 hours away, but they're not coming from the local area. So if they are coming from the local area, okay, here's some directions to campus, right? Very standard. Thanks for scheduling the tour. When on the day of your visit, here's some directions. Make sure you use this parking lot. If you're in Philadelphia, trying to never park on the street because you're going to get a ticket, and look for this entrance, right? Now, what if you're not coming from Philadelphia, right? So you're coming from further away. Then you might have directions, but maybe local accommodations. And then maybe you wait a day, and it's like, okay, how do you make the most of your day, right? Maybe you're going to spend, if somebody's coming from a couple hours away, maybe they're going to have lunch there, stay for dinner, stay over. They want to do some sightseeing. This is where you can say, hey, I know you're not coming from the area, but here's some of our favorite places to go to eat. Here are some really great places to go check out. Go check out the Liberty Bell, right? So you can automate that message based upon just simply, are they local or not? Now, again, if this doesn't apply to you, replace location with, the example I use, I was a baseball player, right? So I said I'm interested in baseball. And maybe you have that as an option for people to choose on the form, or maybe you get that some other way. Maybe there's a message pre-loaded in here from the coach. Maybe there's an invitation to come check out a baseball game, whatever it might be. But hopefully you can start seeing that by getting some of this information one way or the other, we can and should automate these messages based upon what they're telling us. Are they local or not? Are they interested in baseball or not? Are they really interested in robotics, right? So this is where I was saying, you could really go down the rabbit hole and build all these automations out. Just think about what you're doing right now. What information are you getting right now? What could we build an automation on that you're already asking? That would be really simple and easy. Location's an easy one. What else would be really easy for you? And then, again, as we get further down this branch of automation, directions, local accommodations, how to make the most of your day. Then 24 hours before, what if there's an email from admissions, but also the student ambassador that is also helping out with the tour? Let's say I'm the student ambassador. Hey, I just wanted to know you're going to be coming to campus tomorrow. I remember when I'm a junior now. I remember when I came to campus with my family, and I'm really looking forward to sharing why I love the school and looking forward to meeting you, right? So you can and should include that type of messaging as well, beyond just the normal reminders. So that's 24 hours before. And then 2 hours maybe before the event or the tour, we can send an email and a text. So you can integrate text. Text has been something that, again, I've been asked a lot more about recently. I know some schools are using it. It's not as widespread, but it's becoming more popular. Look, here's what you need to know about text messages. They get open 98% of the time. And so people are going to see it. And it will increase show up rates just by simple reminders, especially if you're going to be doing some webinars. You're likely going to start seeing some text messages from me. You know, if you end up filling out a form and giving your phone number, I'm incorporating more text messages into my reminders, even for my own webinars. So I would encourage to use it for tours, events, whatever it might be. But get those phone numbers, and you can incorporate text automatically in here as well to boost those conversion rates or show up rates. All right. So again, not overly advanced, just one simple branch logic based upon their location. Start thinking about what could you branch out from a logic perspective based upon those explicit triggers potentially. All right, let's go into some others. Here's the other one I really like to automate, and this is a perfect complement to the one we just went through, which is the no-show nurture sequence. So what you're able to do is, let's say that a person didn't show up for their tour. Clint and his family didn't show up. You would just go in and you can say, you label them as a no-show, and you can automatically say, hey, so sorry we didn't connect. Hopefully you're able to reschedule. Here's my link. That could be an email, a text message. Wait a day, send another reminder. Okay, so simple, but automate it so that you don't have to manually do it. You can just go in and say, this person didn't show up, and then you trigger the automation. So that's another standard automation recommending to set up. What are some others? Future family, pretty straightforward, right? But let's say so you could do this automatically as well. Somebody fills out a form, and maybe you ask the question, what year are you looking to enter? And maybe they put in 26, 27. You can add a tag to them if they say that. Set an admissions reminder date for maybe beginning of the year of 2026. You're going to wait up until that point, and then maybe you send them an email like, hey, it's time. We're accepting applications now. Admissions is open, right? So that's how you can automate that. You can even do some follow-up messages. Frequently asked questions email, financial aid email, wait another day, send another follow-up email about the process. So for those of you that might be having families that are inquiring and they're 2+ years away, and it's like, hey, I can't get them into our enrollment management software, that doesn't mean we still shouldn't be in touch with them. Put them into your nurture list, one, but two, automate these reminders to go out that anybody that's in this, that's tagged as 2026, they're at least going to get an email that's like, hey, admissions is open now. It's time to inquire and apply. All right. Let's see what else we've got in here. Oh, let me show you. Manage scoring. Let me show you an example of how you could set up scoring. So we talked about lead scoring. Again, if you have a platform that can do this, great. If not, understand like this is possible. It's usually part of a lot of these platforms like ours and a HubSpot. But just take a look at this. And this is pretty straightforward. If somebody was tagged as they're interested in high school, I'm just using that as an example, they get 1 point. If they opened one of your emails, that's a point. So if you get somebody that's just opening a lot of emails, that's adding to their score. If they fill out an inquiry form, it's 20 points. That's going to get a lot more weight than just opening an email. If they have a sibling at the school, so if they have a sibling, there's a higher likelihood that they're probably going to be applying. They get 3 points. Maybe their parent is an alum. They get 3 points. They booked an appointment on your calendar, 15 points. So all these points add up. And maybe when you get to a certain point of, somebody has opened the last 4 emails, you might want to get a notification like, hey, should I reach out to this person? So lead scoring gives you really some really interesting insight into how folks are engaged with you, who's staying engaged, and also giving you that data of what were the scores of people that actually applied and enrolled. And then that will give you kind of benchmarks. It's like, okay, anybody that's applied and enrolled, their score ends up being about a 50 or a 60. Okay, how do you help even manufacture that? Getting them to read more of your emails, engage with more of your content, making sure that they get on campus, right? So that's how we can use lead scoring. Let me take a look and see if there's any other automations that are important here. No show nurture. I think that's it. So those are some of the core use cases. So to kind of recap this, I would recommend trying to do a reactivation campaign. If it's possible for you to take a look to see who hasn't been active, but they're in your database, send them an email. Are you still interested in our school, in a high school, in kindergarten? Trying to set up a long-term nurture sequence so that you have a place to, certainly you always want to be in touch with people because we know that they're 6 months, a year away, but also a place to send people after they're done their automation. All right. So what I'm going to do now is let me stop sharing. Let's go back to sorry, one second. I'm going to go back to the deck here real quick. Got it. Hold tight. There we go. I knew I'd get it at some point. So let's get back to where we were. Looks like I lost it when I switched screens. Okay, so let's do a quick recap. Determine your goals, right? So that's step one, certainly. Is like, what's important for us to track? What are our goals with automation? What's just, it's a pain in the butt for you to do right now. Is there a way to automate it, right? So maybe starting with those first 1 or 2 automations, making sure that there's no dead ends, and picking a few automations to start. So that's how I would recommend, kind of leaving here today. And like I said, I would do a reactivation campaign probably to start. So I'm going to open it up for questions now. As I'm opening up for questions, please feel free to start typing away some questions. But I also want to throw this offer out there to you. So if you're using an existing piece of software or you're not using software at all, what you just saw was kind of a piece of, one of my goals inside the AIMS platform was not just to give you the software, but to have all these kind of best practices built in. So all of those campaigns are pre-built essentially for anybody that uses the software, from the nurture campaigns. And that's just, we're just talking about emails and nurture, not even landing pages and ad campaigns. So if you're interested in all of those pre-built campaigns, from admission events, lead magnets, advertising, setting up your lead scoring, attribution and conversion reporting, that was a big piece as well. It's like, how do we know that the Facebook ad or the email campaign resulted in an enrollment? That's actually something new we just added, which is email ROI tracking. Are we getting applications and enrollment from our email campaigns? If you go and like have somebody else build this stuff for you, and I would know this is what I used to do, or you go try to buy the software, it could end up, especially if you're getting it done for you, it can end up being in the $20,000 plus range. If you're just buying software, there's a lot of subscription fees, but if you want done for you, it ends up being $20,000 plus. I just wanted to highlight that if you're not using software currently, or you're using a lot of different pieces that aren't talking with each other, I wanted to create the simplest pricing possible. No additional fees to do onboarding, get this set up for you. It ranges from $97 to $247 a month for the platform that you saw, which we just went through the automation, but you can do advertising, the calendar booking, a CRM, pre-built campaigns, all of it. Let me go over to the questions as well as they're coming up. Yeah, I see a couple questions, so I will get to those questions. So If you're interested in at least checking out the software to see how you can implement it, couple ways to do that once I click on the right screen. One is you can always book a demo with me, or in the upcoming events, tomorrow and next week, I'm doing demo days. If you just want to hop on kind of webinar like this, where I'm going through a demo, I'm doing that as well. So these links, I'll put in the chat. You'll get them in the slide deck, but you always go to the website and go to demo or the upcoming events, and you will be able to book a demo. All right, couple questions. All right, advice for learning differences. I struggle with applying standard practice automations because we're such a specific audience. Yeah, so I think, first of all, it has to make sense. I worked with one school that was for autism. I worked with a couple schools for autism, worked with a couple schools that were for gifted children, so that, they were unique in their own right. And a couple of the automations that, like one that comes to mind was what I call like a lead magnet automation. So it wasn't getting too fancy per se, but it was leading with content that would be helpful to that audience, and then automating the messaging that would relate to them. So when, like for example, a couple schools I work with for autism, we had an interactive questionnaire that was, is my child autistic? Right. So they might want to know, like, what are some of the flags that would indicate is my child autistic? And they would go through, answer the questions. And then once they filled it out, then they would be sent messaging like, thank you for filling this out. Based upon your responses or just the fact that you filled it out, here are some resources to help you based upon what you've told us. And so that's probably one of the automations I found to be most successful, because it's helpful, valuable content that's being delivered based upon the information that they've told you. Now, doing other things like just having a nurture sequence, reaching out to people, my first reaction is I don't see an issue with that for that particular audience. But Aaron, I would say if there's something you're thinking about or struggling with, like, hey, is this okay? I would say please follow up here in the chat. But I think a lot of the automations that we at least went through, it shouldn't really matter. Because at the end of the day, all you're trying to do is use automation to make sure that you're delivering helpful, valuable content to the families. Michael, do you have, and so real quick, Aaron, I hope that answered your question, but please follow up with me either on the chat here or following the webinar. Happy to jump on a call and answer those questions. Michael, do you have data on the best performing kinds of content across these campaigns? Like what actually gets people to engage, read, click? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what we've essentially built in, right? It's, okay, what is the email or text message that's really great for that 48 hours prior to an event? Or if somebody has a lead magnet, what are the email sequences that are designed to go out that can get somebody from downloading a guide to actually inquiring? So we have some data that when using a certain sequence of emails, and it's different for every school, but a certain sequence of emails, we've actually seen upwards of 20% of families that download a lead magnet will inquire within that email sequence, because that's your ultimate goal. Yes, let's give them good content, but how do we get them to the next step of the admissions process? And so, so part of it is, when you say the best performing kinds of content, it depends on what's triggering, right? I remember, no, this has nothing to do with automation, but when you think about content, it's like somebody just came on campus for a tour. I know a school that went around, like, again, if you're interested in baseball, went to the baseball coach, handed him the phone. Hey, make this video real quick for this student, or, for the person that you met that was interested in baseball, and just say, thanks for attending. We'd love to invite you to a game. They put it on their phone, and then they include that in their email outreach, right? So there's some manual stuff in there, but I'm using that as an example that content depends upon what the process is and what's triggering that automation. So yes, there's always best practices, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's like, what is going to create that best connection based upon what they've chosen as or whether it's an explicit trigger or an implicit trigger. And so I want to keep elaborating because I know I'm kind of saying, no, it depends, and that's always an answer. But like, for example, Michael, a reactivation campaign, it's very tempting in a reactivation campaign to write like a long email. It's like, hey, haven't heard from you in a while. Like, here's what's going on, right? If you write an email today, if you're able to get a list of people that have not been active, and you just write, hey, are you still interested in whatever they originally inquired about? High school, kindergarten, still interested, whatever. You will get responses. Some yeses, some nos. Obviously, not everybody's going to respond, but like a simple email like that works out really well. So hopefully that answers your question to a degree, Michael. But so what I would say is the templates that we have in here are kind of all best practices in terms of like when to deliver a certain email, timing, the type of messaging that should go out. So hopefully that's helpful. What else? What other questions? Well, all right, everybody. I'll be on here for the next couple of minutes. If there's any other questions, I'll just recap by saying again, there's going to be webinar events each week. Next week, I'm having one on Google Ads. So you can go to the upcoming events to check that out. Also demo days. And again, if you kind of want to see the platform in action, my goal was, how do we incorporate all of the software you could possibly need with the coaching you need to implement it? So myself and my team, we would help you set this up, those automations, everything. How do you do it with reduced costs? Hopefully, if anybody is paying for the software, you realize that, you might be paying for 2 pieces of software and it's significantly more than this. How do we incorporate all of those? How do we get the data so that what emails, what ads, what channels resulted in admissions results, enrollments? That's kind of everything that's in there. Would love to show it to you, whether one-on-one or during a demo day. Got a question. Michael said, what kind of trigger is webinar attendance in your system? I'm looking forward to seeing what's in this workflow. I actually keep it kind of simple. You'll see. You'll get some follow-up emails from me. Again, it's primarily going to be emails. Within a couple hours, you'll get the recording. And then you'll get a couple follow-up emails, hopefully encouraging you, right? Just as you would encourage somebody who attended a tour, hey, your next step is, why don't you come on campus? Why don't you let's have a conversation? I would encourage you all to have a conversation with me. Let's talk about how we can implement this software. It can pretty much be set up for your school, by the way, by next week, right? Depending upon what you want to set up. With all that marketing, everything we went through, it's kind of built, ready to go. We would work together, set up a couple of times, build it, and it's off and ready to go from pre-built campaigns. So it gets me giddy just talking about it because I've loved software, so it only makes sense that I kind of get in the software world. For the folks that are using it already, it's already streamlining things and reducing costs dramatically. All right, folks. Well, again, thanks for hopping on. Hope to see you demo day tomorrow. If anybody's interested in demo day tomorrow, and otherwise, have a great rest of the week. Hopefully, see you next week on another webinar. Take care, everybody. Thanks for joining me.